Let's talk about leg drive. Why is it important to have in the deadlift, and what are common mistakes people make when trying to get good leg drive? So why is it important? Well, check it out. When you're lifting something heavy off the ground, you want to be able to push into the ground with your legs. You don't need some sort of study or a physics degree to understand that you're going to be stronger pushing into the ground like this rather than locking your legs out and then stiff-legging the deadlift. It's not that this is wrong, it's just you're not going to be able to deliver as much force into the ground compared to if you did this. It's that simple, right? So that being said, what are common mistakes people make when trying to execute on this seemingly simple concept? The first part is not knowing how to hip hinge well enough. Because check it out, leg drive comes from you driving your entire leg into the ground like a donkey kick. And a donkey kick starts from the hips. It doesn't start from the knee. This is not leg drive. A leg drive is not you doing a leg extension into the ground. Leg drive is you doing a donkey kick into the ground, which means your hip hinge, your ability to bend and straighten at your hips, better be up to snuff, or else you're not getting that full leg push. Simple as that. Another common mistake that people make is not having good enough lat engagement. Because check it out, in leg drive you're pushing your upper back into the ceiling like this, right? You're going up like this, and the weight is just hanging off your arms like this. But check out what happens if my arms are just way too loosey-goosey. Well, then leg drive might end up making me go like this, or like this. You see, to get really good leg drive, you need to form the wedge of your hips driving forward and your arms driving back. That allows you to then deliver the downward force efficiently. If you don't have that hip hinge ready to drive forward, and if you don't have that lat engagement pulling back, then you're not going to be able to direct all that downward force straight into your feet. So to get really good leg drive, you first need to have your hip hinge be good enough and your lat engagement be good enough. If you want to deep dive further into the hip hinge and the lat engagement aspects of the deadlift, go check out my other videos on that. We're just focusing on leg drive in this video. All right, so those are the major things to look out for to be able to have really good leg drive. One other thing here is, as you are driving up, make sure that you don't lock your knees out super early. I mean, if you followed my hip hinge video where I talked about how a good hip hinge is one where you keep your knee over your foot the whole time, then you would have already known this. But assuming you haven't watched that video, leg drive requires that you can keep your shin driving into the ground the whole time. Because again, just like you don't want to stiff leg from the very start, you also don't want to stiff leg halfway up as well. You do this, no more leg drive for you. So to keep your leg drive present throughout the entire deadlift, you gotta keep your knees bent enough the whole way. And only at the very top should you start to lock out your knee so that you time your hip lockout with your knee lockout. Got it? Like that. Not that, but that. So that's really it for leg drive. Really the only other thing to be mindful of if you're still struggling is your knee mobility and your ankle mobility. Because check it out, you don't want this to happen as you're pushing into the ground, right? That kind of compromises how well you can push into the ground. You also don't want this to happen as you're pushing into the ground. So any scenarios where you see the outer edge of your foot losing contact with the ground, or the inner edges of your feet losing contact with the ground, you might want to look at your mobility in your ankle, knee, and or hip, and play with your stance to find the one that allows you to drive with the whole foot and not allowing the inner edges or the outer edges to come up off the floor as you're driving. All right, so that does it for leg drive, and those are the 4 pillars of proper deadlift mechanics.